is that we should moderate minimum wage increases, and 2, focus on productivity growth in order to achieve sustained and rapid inclusive growth through expansion of jobs and gainful jobs of that. Now, question of course then is, okay, what do we do? I mean, concretely, what do we propose? I think first of all we need to clarify 2 broad objectives for our proposed jobs expansion and development initiative for poverty alleviation, or JEDI. May the force be with you. These 2 broad objectives are essentially: 1, expand gainful jobs through the acceleration of labor-intensive production, particularly manufacturing of tradable commodities, and 2, improve investments in human capital, particularly in education and other human capital development initiatives. I think Babes have clearly shown the predominant evidence about the damaging impact of minimum wage on employment, income, and poverty status of households, particularly those belonging to the disadvantaged population groups. Now, the main point that one can draw from that analysis, that empirical analysis, is that minimum wages and other current labor regulation should not be looked at as the only option to address the plight of workers. In fact, I would go further and say they should not be regarded as the weapons of choice. There are better alternatives, such as mentioned already, education, increasing quality job opportunities through the manufacturing sector, which can provide higher wages and more formal conditions, and increasing opportunities for training on the job. And secondly, that helping the poor directly with their subsistence needs through direct and temporary income subsidy might be a better alternative to promote social protection. So our point of view after our study is that probably one should consider that it is time to leave the what we call the beaten path and try new approaches. Here we present a 12-point program called the JEDI, which consists of the following proposals. Note that we are not presenting this as individual proposals, but this should be seen as a package. We believe that poverty alleviation, there's no magic bullet in poverty alleviation and inclusive growth. Rather, what is needed is a combination of measures that would address a variety of specific issues that are interrelated. So the first point, item in the JEDI program is implementing measures that would minimize the imposition of labor regulations and practices detrimental to and discriminatory against the poor and other disadvantaged population groups. I think we have to be sensitive to the impact on this disadvantaged population of labor and in fact generally other regulations or practices. In particular here, I think I would like to put on the table for debate, not as an economist, but from a moral perspective, that there is a tension here between the right to work of people, particularly of the poor, unemployed, underemployed, etc., young people, the right to work versus the right of organized labor to impose regulations that are detrimental to this disadvantaged population. I think that the right to work issue has not received sufficient attention and debate. Second, allowing firms to hire skilled and poor workers who want to voluntarily opt out of the mandatory wage norm, recognizing that it hurts rather than helps them ensure rather than help them. Ensuring, of course, that workers' acceptance of the offer is voluntary and well informed. This second point is, of course, related to the right of work issue debate that I hope we're going to have. Third, experimenting with a Singaporean-style scheme providing income supplement to targeted ultra-poor workers to close the gap between market wage and decent wage norm that Filipino society wants. Filipino society, not foreign determined social norms, because maybe the norms that are being called for by developed countries may not be suitable to our situation. Fourth, transforming the consultation process from a tripartite into a quadripartite system, or a system that includes the key stakeholders. The idea here is to give the poor, unemployed, underemployed, self-employed, small enterprises direct representation in the determination of labor regulations and policies. Fifth, encouraging labor unions to focus on raising the competencies and productivity of workers as a means to achieve decent wages. We believe that this is a more sustainable, practical approach to sustained increases in wages and family income. In this regard, we were asked during some of our presentations whether we are anti-labor union. We say, no, we love our labor unions. But we just want them to focus also on productivity and helping the unemployed and underemployed and the poor also. Sixth point, lengthening from 6 months to 2 years the compulsory regularization of young workers to expand their learning experience and build their skills on the job. I think that 6 months, we believe, is too short for firms to be able to recover back their investment in the training of workers, and also it's too short a time for the workers to reveal their competencies, their attitudes, their ability to work in teams, etc. Definitely, we feel that the time has to be extended. 7, simplifying labor dispute resolution processes to cut the time, cost, inconvenience, and uncertainty involved. I think both sides, the workers' sides, the labor union side, and the management sides are both complaining about the dispute resolution processes being too costly in terms of time, convenience, and at a cost. 8. Making the rules on hiring and firing decisions more flexible, leaving the firms and workers to negotiate and work out agreements that are mutually beneficial. I think these rules also must take into account the right to work of the unemployed, underemployed, and poor people. 9. Accelerating the accumulation of skills. Here, we would like to ensure that the K-12 reform is implemented well, and then also institutional reforms of TESDA, as we had articulated in our 2011 Economic Policy Monitor paper with Dr. Beda, and also pursuing the ongoing CHED initiatives would also be very helpful, such as the Unifast bill that is now in Congress that seek to provide financial assistance in the form of grants and aid, scholarships, and loans to students who are deserving. Then, implement the extension of the demand-side education assistance of Pantawid Pamilya. Here, I think that we are glad to see that the coverage of the Pantawid Pamilya has been extended to include completion of high school. And we know from our previous work that the rate of return to high school graduation is about 20%, and that actually, when you compare the earnings of those who complete high schools and those who complete only elementary, the difference is double. So it's a large impact, the impact of high school education, but we need to be careful because if this educated labor goes out to the market and there is a weak demand for their labor, that what would happen is that the differential, the effect, the return to education is going to fall very fast. It will fall very fast without adequate increases in the growth of demand for jobs, for labor. So the 12th point is to facilitate the emergence of a well-organized coalition of stakeholders devoted to finding and promoting approaches that effectively advance the interests of poor workers. In other words, it's not enough for us to enlighten people. I think people of goodwill should form a coalition of relevant stakeholders to advance the interests of the poor, unemployed, underemployed, the young, the women, children. Now, we have made presentations to various fora, from Luzon to Mindanao, to the Senate, to other government institutions. We would like, and some of these discussions have found their way to columnists and newspaper articles. Let me just summarize some of them and comment on the critique of our study. Okay. I am addressing this and I'm articulating this as I have read them from the various media. One says, if there are no minimum wages, slavery will follow. There will be a race to the bottom. Okay? In my view, this is a scare tactic intended or intended to mislead public opinion. We're not calling for the abolition of minimum wages, but rather making adjustments to it and making sure that there's moderation in the demands for minimum wages. Now, let me give you a counter example of why this statement is misleading. By citing the experience of Singapore and Malaysia, where they have no minimum wages. And I don't think you can correctly describe Singapore and Malaysia as having slavery, or that there is a race to the bottom in terms of wages. In fact, there is a race to the top in terms of wages, as wages increases when there's more demand for labor than the supply of labor. Then there is the statement by one of the labor leaders that he finds our findings unbelievable because small enterprises are exempted from minimum wages. The fact of the matter, however, is that those exemptions he's referring to relate only to micro enterprises, which I think by definition is like enterprises with workers 5 or less. Now, the empirical evidence clearly shows that, in fact, when you look at the small enterprises defined as those that are those with workers 6 and above, but less than the size of large firms, that clearly the impact, according to the findings of Dr. Lanzona, is negative on the employment of small enterprises. But you can look at it also from the dynamic standpoint. What this implies is that these minimum wages do impede small enterprises from growing up, because when they are, let's say for example the micro enterprises becomes a small enterprise in the sense that they exceed the threshold of 5 workers, that there is a disincentive for them, because then they will have to pay more for, they're being forced to pay more for unskilled labor. So maybe this is an explanation for the so-called missing middle, in which our small enterprises and even micro enterprises are not able to grow, so that we have a missing middle, meaning those large firms that are has developed to become medium scale enterprises are missing in Philippine development. And we know for a fact that those small enterprises are actually very critical to the development of poverty alleviation and job creation. Now, okay, so then the reason that they give, and this is a statement from one of the undersecretary of the DOLE, basically is saying that they are not in favor. In a word, they say it's a non-starter, this proposal to exempt small enterprises from minimum wages, because of the fear that the large firms will take advantage of this exemption by dividing themselves up into small firms. Okay? But the fact of the matter is that, as we found in our study, large firms are positively impacted by minimum wages. So there's no incentive for them to break up. Okay, so finally, another reaction to our study is to say, well, there are other binding constraints that are more important. The cost of power, infrastructure, quality of education, etc. That we should be focusing on them rather than issues of labor regulations. And I say to that actually the general tenor of this kind of criticism is that we should not be focusing on labor regulations because there are other more important issues. We say that there's no magic bullet. We recognize the importance of these other critical binding constraints, but nevertheless, there is a case to be made that the impact of minimum wage and other labor regulations are significant enough to matter. In other words, let's use all the relevant tools that we have rather than search for a magic bullet because there is none. And one of these measures that we should pay attention to because of their significant impact on the welfare of the poor is minimum wages and other related